Welcome to Behind the Smile with Ash Butterss, a podcast designed to reveal the truth behind the masks we wear. Together, we look to demystify the human mind and its behaviours in relation to mental health, trauma and addiction. My name's Ash and I'll be your host as we uncover the real stories of people's pain and the steps they've taken to live a life of freedom in recovery. From sobriety to spirituality, join me each week as we uncover the reasons why people seek recovery and how their lives have changed by living one day at a time.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today on the show we have none other than David Wilson, also known as Sober Dave if you know him from Instagram. Dave is a sobriety coach and author and is the creator and host of One for the Road, a sobriety podcast that shares stories of those who've changed their relationship with alcohol and the steps they've taken towards positive change. Dave made the decision to quit drinking for good on the 7th of January 2019 and has spent his most recent years helping other people to do the same. Dave provides one-on-one coaching to people all over the world, offering a non-judgmental and confidential safe space for those looking to change their lives for the better. In addition to this, he is a leading voice within the online sober community, amassing to date 74,000 followers on Instagram. So, without any further delay, dialing in from the UK, I'd love to introduce Dave onto the show. Dave, welcome to Behind the Smile. Thank you so much for being here.
Wow, that was an incredible introduction. I love it. Can you send me the recording? Because I'll keep that, I think. It's
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You can have that one for free. No worries.
Oh, thank you. I'm fine, actually. And I'm really grateful that we rescheduled because we were meant to record this last week, weren't we? And I was really rough.
That's it. You weren't feeling well at all.
No, so I'm grateful to you for that, and people can understand what I'm talking about today because my voice had gone, hadn't it?
It had completely gone, and I'm so glad that you were able to rest up and get that out of your system before we kick off into the next craziness of the next few weeks. So really good
absolutely.
To hear that you're feeling better. So
Thank
good.
you.
Now, Dave, before we take a look at the photo that I've asked you to bring into the studio today, I'd love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So can we start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself, perhaps where you grew up, where you live now, what an average day looks like, and what you like to do for fun?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in UK in Surrey. Well, it's the actual London borough called Croydon. With my mum and dad, we never had any money really. You know, second-hand clothes, and I went to quite a rough school, really. But they always made sure we were fed properly, and we used to spend Sundays together. My mum would have the Carpenters on the record player, my dad be clanking around in the garage, mending something, you know. So it felt quite a secure childhood, really, you know. But then, gradually, as I got a bit older, my mum and dad started arguing a little bit more. And things changed, and that led on to what I'll talk about later on in the podcast of how alcohol came into my life at the age of 14. But it was quite it felt like a nice childhood. At the minute, I'm currently living in a beautiful area in the East Midlands, surrounded by countryside. I can walk out of my house now and be in a field full of horses within 30 seconds. And that leads on to what I do for fun now. So I've got a gorgeous little dog called Rose. She's a little Chihuahua puppy.
I've seen photos of Rose on Instagram and oh my gosh, my heart exploded.
She's amazing, you know, and we're like a proper little couple. We're so codependent on each other, you know. I woke up this morning and I had my arm around her and she was snuggled into my neck fast asleep and it's like, oh, well, that'd do me, you know. So I live in a beautiful part of the country now, and my average day depends on how many people I'm working with. I myself, as you've lovely explained, that I have my own podcast. I do a bit of writing. I'm planning my Dry January campaign. I do that every year, Dry Jan, Sober Dave. And I'm planning guests, which it'd be great to get you on for that as well. But the time's a bit odd because you're in Australia. But, so there's always something going on in the community. And, one thing that's come from my sobriety is that I was in a trade from when I left school, thinking that would be the job I would do until I was kicking up daisies. But since sobriety, I trained to be a grey area drinking coach. I had 2 years of counselling training behind me before that as well. And I absolutely love my career change now. It is so brilliant. And, the results, as you know, we get from helping people, and you get messages coming in a year later going, do you know what, it was one post you said or working with you on a few sessions that has not just completely changed my life, but everyone around me. The knock-on effect is incredible for the relationships, the kids, everywhere.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
It becomes generational, doesn't it?
It does. And it goes down, as you say, through generations because the kids start talking about it, and then you've got the knowledge there to discuss what you know about it. And it's not about telling them not to do it. It's about educating them on maybe if they want to explore it, to explore it in a more mindful way rather than just go out like we did back in the day, So, yeah, that's me, sure. Really.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that extended introduction, and it's really great for our listeners to know a little bit more about you. So that then brings us into your photo. Now, Dave, I asked you to bring in a photo today that was from a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile. So you were projecting one version of yourself to the world, but the reality was you were dying on the inside. You were really suffering. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about the photo that you've chosen?
Yeah, it's powerful even when you say it behind the smile, because it has a lot of impact on that particular photo. And I think I was two people back then. I was someone that was winging it through life every single day. I was running my business, pretending to be this happy chappy that had everything under control, but waking up at 3 o'clock every morning, not knowing who I'd messaged. I didn't know whether I'd argued with anyone, and that feeling of not knowing is awful, and you lay there for 2 hours and you're still, for me, I was still drunk, and this was a rolling thing day in, day out, because I was a daily drinker. But the way my drinking manifested was into spirits, vodka, so I was getting drunk really, really quickly. So it was like playing Russian roulette. My mood swings would either go one way or the other, So I didn't even know what I was capable of that evening. I could have had a bad day, so I was irritable anyway. So I was just pouring petrol on the fire. But the photo was probably one of the darkest points in my life. I didn't know where I was with myself. And I look at my eyes and I feel real compassion for myself back then. Like, it would be easy to go look at the state of that, like we all do, and we have the embarrassment and the shame. But when I look at the picture, it goes deeper than that, and it's like, you poor soul, what are you actually hiding from there? What pain are you going through in your life there? And it wasn't just the pain of past trauma, it was the pain of what I was reduced to, When I was younger, I was a good sportsman. I did a lot of different sports. I was a healthy weight. I looked really well. And I was drinking probably like any other teenager or someone in their early 20s, like going out clubbing, meeting women and having a real good time, but wouldn't even think about drinking in the week, or I might go a couple of weeks and then it'd be, come on, let's go out again, and yeah, we can have a few drinks. It wasn't an issue. But then gradually throughout the years it changed, and then I started to use it as a coping strategy, and then it became a daily habit, and then it becomes solitary drinking. And then I met someone else and then moved in with them, and I had to adapt my drinking around that situation. So I started to hide alcohol and stuff. So the picture really meant something to me because it was a pivotal part of my life that it was completely out of control. And looking back then, I was drinking up to a litre of vodka a day. So how I'm even here, I don't know. How I sustained a relationship at the time, I don't know. But how I worked, I don't know. But we become incredibly resilient when we drink like that. We adapt to so many situations, and it was almost like I was living my life in slow motion because I wasn't present with anything. It was just getting to the end of the day as well as I could, so I could start drinking again to block out the pain. And I'm not sure, even in hindsight, if I even knew what the pain was. I think it was the pain from where I was at that moment of like, my life is such a mess now, and I don't know how to get out of it. So it's that kind of feeling rather than, oh, my childhood was terrible. I'd gone way past that, and I'd turned into this manic person that was 127 kg, blood pressure to the roof. The doctor said that I could drop down dead. Acid reflux every day. I projectile vomit acid out of nowhere. Cholesterol sky high. Probably heart disease. All sorts of things. And I thought, you know what? I'm on a road to nowhere here. And that's what the picture portrays to me.
So can you remember back to what you were feeling at that time?
Yeah, desperation.
So
I wasn't in a place of, do you know what, this is who I am and what. I was absolutely desperate because I didn't know how to get out of it. I felt trapped in my own body, trapped in my own mind of I have no idea how to escape this. This is now what I'm defined as, this raging alcoholic that drinks enough to kill the average person. And I was completely and utterly trapped in my own body, I think is how I felt then.
Now, to explaining that to somebody who also identifies as being an alcoholic, I completely relate and it resonates. But for somebody who's listening to this who's not an alcoholic, I imagine that they would think to themselves, well, why didn't you just stop? So can you explain that a little bit for us?
Well, it boils down to, one, I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to get support. And there's also a part which is the other side of it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop. And not many people talk about that, right? When I stopped, I had to be completely honest with myself. It's like I've got two roads I'm going down here. One is in the ground and two is a potentially healthy lifestyle further down the line, right? So I had to gradually start to change my mindset of where I was going in my life. And I looked around me at what I had in my life rather than what I didn't have. And I start to slowly start to plant that seed that there might be an option here. And that would have to be to end my relationship with alcohol. It could never be moderation. It could never be like, oh, I have a drink at the weekends, I won't drink in the week. I tried all that. It's like finishing with your ex and sleeping with them on a Saturday night. It just doesn't work. Do you know what I mean?
No, it's not healthy.
And do you know, the other thing as well, Ash, is that I also, since I become sober, realise it's not about quantity as well. Because we can all go, oh, wow, you got to that rock bottom, did you? And you were in the right state. I only drink every other night. And it's not about the quantity. It's about how it affects your life, right? So it doesn't really matter as much about I drink more than you, so I've got a bigger problem. Because if alcohol is a problem in your life, whatever that may look like, whether it means your parenting, your anxiety levels, your sleep, your quality of life, then it's a problem, full stop, right? So it's how we deal with it. So for me, it might have been harder to stop because of the amount I was drinking, but equally, it's like you have to weigh up what is best for you moving forward. And for me, it was almost like I had an epiphany, you know, like a final chance, a bit like a cat who's got 9 lives, right? And I was on my 9th life, and whatever you believe in, the universe or God or whatever, like something happened to me that changed everything for me, and I stopped. And that was 4 years ago now, and I've never looked back, you know, and it's hard to say, well, do you think you'll ever drink again? My answer to that is no, but hey, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I totally know exactly what you're saying. I'd love to know, when you were in that pre-contemplation stage, you had that desperation, but you didn't know if you really even wanted to stop. What that brought up for me as I was listening was, I remember being consumed by fear. Number one, that I thought if I were to become sober, then I would never live a happy life. My life from here on out would be bleak, it would be boring, and I'd never experience joy or excitement again. And the other thing was that I had examples of sober people in my life, within my immediate family, but their sobriety, which was edging on decades, seemed so far away and so unattainable to me while I was in active addiction that it was almost like better the devil I know.
Yeah.
Even though it was killing me, I thought the jump to the other side just seemed way too far, too much of a leap. I was going to fall down the crack. So why don't I just stay here and continue drinking where I know that I can control my environment and my space and not fear or have that sense of fear arise?
I completely relate to that. And that's why it's not always beneficial to compare. Because if you look in the sober sphere, right, we're all different. We all offer different things. And some people out there, it's like, oh, I'm so bored of that. Oh, let's run 10K and let's jump out of a plane. And it doesn't have to be that. You know, it's like you're on your own journey and you know you. And this is why every single person has their own bespoke way to deal with it. And for me, it was like, okay, I need to believe I can do it, right? I gave up smoking years ago, right? I was a 20-a-day man, and one day I just chucked him in the bin and said, I'm done now. And I've never had a fag since, right? So I know I've got that, like, binary thinking where it's all or nothing. And I was like that with my drinking. Like, I could never go out and just have 2, because the minute I had a sip, I wanted 10, you know. But it's like you have to work out what works for you. And you know, that's including support. You know, like AA might work for you. You might like the structure of AA. Like, find military people and like the routine of a set time, a set meeting, a set place and whatever. For me, I don't like being told what to do. I'm not saying they do that, but it felt a little bit like controlled, and it's like, oh, I don't know if that's going to work for me. So I found the sober community, and then I realised that worked for me, because I felt like there are people out there similar to me that are further down the line, and they've done it, so if they can do it, I can do it. You know, it worked for me. And you have to find your groove, I think. But I honestly believe mindset is everything. And even podcasts like this, there could be one thing one of us will say and it would go, oh, yeah, I feel like that. I can really relate to that. So it's, you know, the whole one day at a time thing. I think as humans, these days, because we love instant gratification, you know, with the swiping up and down on the phone and all this bit, the messages pinging in on our phone and whatever, we want things to happen yesterday. And with this, you have to take a day at a time and not look too forward and think, well, how am I going to deal with a holiday? How am I going to deal with my birthday? How am I going to deal with Christmas? You know, you have to think, how am I going to deal with today, and get to the end of the day and put my pillow on the head and go, do you know what? There's a tick there because I'm sober, and it could have been challenging or not, but by minimalising that sort of scope of time, it can really make it more achievable.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I remember that was one of the things that would put me off thinking about giving up. I'd think, well, how could I ever enjoy my wedding day? Or how could I ever, I heard someone share recently, they were thinking about how could I possibly toast my son on his wedding day, and his son was 4 years old. So it's just like,
I know.
The craziness that we bring up, or the reasons why we shouldn't stop, they'll come thick and fast. But at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding that when you do give up, you get this incredible life that you never even imagined was possible.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, because I'm of the older generation, the granddaddy of Instagram, is I was 54 when I stopped drinking, right? And I often say to people, you're never ever too old to change your life, right? Because for me, I was drinking for exactly 4 decades. I don't remember my 40s. Now, how tragic is that? Because I was in a complete mess with vodka. Every single day, I just got up. I didn't know where I was. I would go to work and then go home and do the same. I don't remember hardly anything, right? So at the age of 54, everything has changed for me. And it's powerful, because I think especially in men as well, because men are like, I've been doing it all my life, why change now? That kind of attitude, or I ain't really got a problem, it's just a few beers with the lads, there's a denial. Do you know what I mean? It's like, God, we've got to wake up and actually see what alcohol really is. It's a highly toxic drug, it ruins people's lives, it kills people. I get message in my DMs saying, I've just jumped on my brother's Instagram and I thought I'd let you know that he died last week. And when you hear things like that, it's like, God, that's the reality of it, and we all have a choice, we all have an option here. So the default setting that we have of like, how can I enjoy my holiday next year is like almost like primitive thinking. We have to sort of stop this default setting that we all say, and we're all capable of it in life in general, these sweeping statements, and go, what is the truth around my relationship with alcohol? Because if that was a human being, 9 times out of 10 you wouldn't stay with them, you would move on, right? So that's why I compare it, the relationship with alcohol, to a lifetime relationship is like, I wouldn't put up with that. The controlling feeling of 2 o'clock every day when you've had a hangover all morning and you're going, oh, I could have one, maybe. I get a couple of bottles just in case, but I just have a couple of glasses. So by 8 o'clock you've already done one, and then you're opening the second one. Hamster wheel of doom, I call it, where you're going round and round and round,
Yeah, it's just that cycle of misery. It just never ends. Dave, you mentioned earlier that you had what you considered to be quite a normal upbringing. Can I ask, was there any alcohol in the family home? Did your parents drink? And when were you sort of first exposed to drinking?
My mum and dad didn't really drink. But my dad used to make homemade wine, so you used to see these huge demijohns. I don't know if you've seen them. They're like huge, I think they're 5 litre or 15 litre bottles, and they got this thing on the top of a bubble. And you would never know what percentage it was or anything. And I remember maybe at Christmas they might have a few, but they didn't really drink, not that I was aware of. But I do know at Christmas I remember having a couple of snowballs. Do you remember them? The Advocar and lemonade, the yellow things.
Yes.
Right? And I was probably only 9 or 10 and it was a bit of fun then, but it wasn't, because I actually really enjoyed it. Like, I think that was the start of my getting the flavour for alcohol. But what happened after that was, I said earlier that mum and dad started arguing and we moved area, and I had to go to this school starting in the second year, where everyone had already settled into secondary school, and I'm walking in and it's like a bag of nerves. And I was quite a shy kid, you know. I wasn't one for being a Jack the Lad in with all the boys and whatever. I kept myself to myself. But then shortly after that, Mum and Dad, my mum actually left my dad, which is rare, and I found a note on the kitchen table saying, "Dave, I've left your dad, I'll be in touch." And then shortly after that, my dad met someone else, and I felt really rejected. Like I was lost. I didn't know where I fitted, why this would happen. Was it my fault? Am I unlovable? All these kind of emotions came up. And then I kind of drifted towards the group of lads that I'd stayed away from, which were the lads that would always have fights at school, always had a girlfriend, and would hang around the shops, right? So it was a feeling of acceptance that I belonged somewhere, because they took me into their group, and instead of being the fighter, I become the drinker in the group. You know, I had that role of, God, he loves a drink, Dave, and whatever. So we used to give all the adults like loose coins, say, "Oh, can you get us 4 cans of Foster's or something?" And then that's what really started it. I loved it, Ash. Like from the off, it was like they say about the old Fosters and their elixir or whatever it is. It's like, oh my God, this gives me confidence. It makes me feel good. My mates are laughing at me because I was naturally quite funny. Drinking's for me. And back then, there was no ID in the pubs. You could go in a pub at 15 years old and get served. So then I was looking up at all these adults thinking, God, this is cool, man. I'm mixing with all the adults, and my dad had this new relationship and my mum had gone, so I felt like, again, accepted and stuff like that. So that was the start of my relationship with alcohol.
It's really interesting that, at that same time that your mum left, and I imagine as a young boy you would have felt a sense of abandonment, that it was at that time that you sought out this group of friends that allowed you to feel accepted. So was that seeking of acceptance something that carried on throughout the rest of your years into adulthood?
Brilliant question, Ash. That's so relevant, because I was insecure. I had lots of self-doubt about who I was, because if your mum can leave you, anyone can. And I became a people pleaser. And people pleasing was by me putting on a performance, like an actor. And I learned throughout the years to shapeshift as well. So I could go in a pub and there could be a solicitor in there, so I would shapeshift to what he would want to hear, or she. Or I could go and there's a builder there, so I'd be more like, "Hello, mate, how you doing?" sort of thing, And I become this role. In fact, I even had a name called Glugs, because I would drink really, really quickly. So I'd walk in the pub, "All right, Glugsy, usual." They would know what drink I'd have, So throughout my whole life, I become this acting figure that played several different parts to be accepted. So I felt loved and appreciated. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me when I stopped drinking. I had no idea who I was. And I had to start again. So I went back to the 14-year-old who was standing outside the off-licence at the roundabout having his first drink, because I hadn't developed emotionally at all. I was stuck in that time frame. And people don't talk about that, about sobriety as well. It's like finding out who you really are. And that, but I don't mean that in a negative. I mean that in a way of, God, this, when we talk about, oh my God, look, I've got sober skin and I've got a glow and I feel healthier. I'm talking about actually getting to know yourself again. I went back to that 14-year-old and I gave him a big hug and I said, "You know what? I've got you, mate, because you've turned out all right, and you've got through life. You're kind. You've got empathy for others. You've had quite a few bumps along the road, but you're all right, mate. From here, we've got each other, you know. And that journey of self-discovery after that was incredible. It was like, even now, there's days I get up and it's like, wow, I didn't know that about myself, you know. And that's such a brilliant part of stopping drinking.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's like they say, you know, you don't get your old life back, you get an entirely new one. And I know for myself, I've learnt so much in, you know, I'm coming up onto 3 years, and absolutely every week I'm learning things about myself, even from my fundamental values down to really simple likes and dislikes, things that I thought I wanted to do. I completely identify with being the people pleaser, the shapeshifter. And what I found was after, 30 odd years of people pleasing and changing myself to fit other people's narratives to keep them happy, I'd become so disconnected from self. And it wasn't until I was able to remove that alcohol, which was keeping me fuzzy, that I was able to start to really tune in and work out who is Ash. And you're absolutely right. I think it's probably the greatest gift that we get from sobriety.
100%. And it's worth considering as well, you know, because people get put off by the thought of past history, you know, like, oh, that means I've got to feel my feelings now and all these things that I've been blocking out, and how do I deal with it? But you can get support, you can get coaching, you can get therapy, you know, you can deal with all that. But it's the finding out about yourself, which is the real golden nugget in sobriety, because you live your true authentic you and you hang up. Like I imagine myself on the 7th of January 2019 hanging up my outfit at the theatre, and I think, right, I'm no longer treading those boards, I'm treading some new ones. And that's with other people as well, and that's why community is so important, to not wander off on your own into the distance, because you can feel lonely enough when you're drinking. The last thing you need is to feel lonely when you're not. And that's why connection is so important when you do it. And that could be by telling your best friend or your partner, or finding the right community on socials. It's connection is so important.
It's the number one. There's a reason they say we don't do recovery alone. No. It's not meant to be done alone. And I love what you touched on, that there are so many different ways that you can find connection, whether that's through a 12-step program, a sober community, the online sober space. There are so many different avenues, and you can be a part of all of them if you want to, or maybe there's just one particular one that works for you.
Absolutely.
Now, I'd love to know, you mentioned that you were 54 when you decided to stop drinking. So there was a lot of life lived there where you were in active addiction. Can you tell me a little bit more about how your drinking impacted your relationships and your parenting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the time I was married, and she didn't know how to manage me, because I would quite often hide my drinking as well. So for her, it looked like I was having a glass of wine, but there would be wine, vodka, cider hidden all over the place because of my shame. You know, the shame in my drinking. I was embarrassed that I got to that, and also there was a part that I needed it as well, because she used to say to me, "Look, why can't we share a bottle of wine?" And that, for me, it was like, I just cannot share a bottle of wine. I'd rather have nothing, because that half a bottle of wine is like a starting pistol to me. My brain would be like, we're off then, Davey boy. We can go into oblivion now. So for me to try and moderate was a complete no-no. So that was never in the mix. But so then I'd say, look, I'm just going to have one bottle of wine. But I would take a glass of wine into the shower and have a bottle of wine while I'm having a shower, so I could come out, I'm already loaded up. Do you know what I mean?
I did the same thing.
And with parenting and stuff, it's you're never present, you know, irrational thinking, low moods. And it's not just that, it's the friends around you as well. For me, I was unstable. I would pick arguments when I was drunk, because I was probably seeking attention again and wasn't getting it. I did a TV series for a few years, right? I was a handyman on a makeover show, right? And I was really, really good friends with this guy. And he made an announcement on social media, right? And I was drunk, and I commented on this thing. But then the comments started to irritate me, right? And then I just let 2 smoking barrels fly with a comment. And then I passed out. When I woke up and I read what I put, and the reaction was like it was almost viral. And this was a guy that I was on TV with. And he didn't speak to me for 3 years. I wasn't invited to his wedding. I lost contact. People, that was all through a drunken evening. And luckily, we're back in touch. I've explained the reasons why, and he's taken it on the chin. But the knock-on effect of our actions when we are in that state, and that's why I call it Russian roulette, because another night I might have been completely different. So this is why when we say about it being a mind-altering drug, it's like when you're topping up every single day, and you might be tired, you might be irritable, you might have had a row. God, the escalation of that mood is unbelievable. And I've had a row indoors and stormed off and fallen asleep in the middle of a field at 4:00 in the morning and don't even remember how I've got there. I could have been robbed, murdered, whatnot. And oh my God, even talking about it now, it really highlights of how bad it was for me. It was really low.
And did you start to repair those relationships while you were still drinking, or is that something that you started to do once you got sober, and how did you go about that?
I think there's certain relationships you can do that, and I am someone that is very open to doing that. I'm one that will hold my hands up to something. Whether they're prepared to accept that is another matter, so you have to take it on that it might not go the way you want it to go. And there's other things as well that you could apologise for and they don't know what you're talking about. I've had that. Because we built it up in our head so much and we think, oh my God, it was so bad for me. And when you say to them, remember that time that, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So it's maybe how, before going in and doing that huge prepared speech of, I've got something to say to you, you better sit down, it's maybe just tiptoe into a conversation and say, well, do you remember that time this happened? And if they go, no, oh, well, okay. Do you know what I mean? Because we do build up this story in ourselves like we've upset every single person in our whole life, and we're set to be doomed forever. So I think we have to be realistic as well.
Oh, absolutely. So tell me, when you finally made the decision to stop in January 2019, how did you go about that? Did you I know that you said you made that decision consciously, but what sort of tools did you lean into or explore to help you through that first, say, 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, well, I had a massively awful 2018. So much happened. I had a terrible experience in the spring of 2018 where I went AWOL, basically, missing, and there was nowhere for me to stay, so I was what you could sort of say was homeless for a few days, and I drank myself into a stupor, and the doctor had double dosed my antidepressants a week before and hadn't asked about my drinking. I was psychotic. I was drinking from 9 in the morning till 3 the next morning, but ended up on a beach every night because I thought it was romantic looking at the stars and the moon, but I could have died of hypothermia. I cut my head open on the stones and it was disaster. Then my mum died. I was with her when she died, and I had a really expensive watch stolen, and it was just a catalogue of things, right? But all that time, I was kind of thinking, I've got to do something about this. I can't carry on like this, So then I went through Christmas, New Year, woke up New Year's Day feeling horrendous, and then was thinking, God, do I really want to start another year like this? And I received a text message on a Monday morning, and it was from a really good friend of mine who's an incredible person, and he said to me, how do you feel about giving up alcohol with me for 3 months? And I just burst out laughing. I thought, I can't do it for 3 days. But throughout the day it trickled in, and it was almost like a subliminal challenge for me. It wasn't like, I think you need to stop drinking, Dave. It was, how do you feel joining me? Was the phrasing of it made it feel more appealing. So I went round that day to see him, and I looked at him, and instantly I said, let's go, let's do it. And then I went to some AA meetings that a friend of mine then was going to, and initially it was okay. I walked in, I love churches, I love the feeling. It's like, la, when you walk in, you know. But after about 4 or 5 meetings, I was hearing the same old thing, and I found it quite suppressing. There was something about it that wasn't fitting quite right with me. And I come out of the last one, I thought, oh, I just want to go to the pub. And I thought, well, that's no good if this is the way I'm going, right? So, and then there was an event mentioned on Instagram, and I bought a ticket and I went, and I nearly didn't go in. I was petrified. But I did go in, and I met some incredible people. And that's really what worked for me. And then in the September, I had my own event, and people flew in from Germany, Ireland, and there was about 80 people there. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe 8-9 months ago I was still drinking, and now I'm holding a sober event that all these people are turning up at, you know. And since then, I've just completed my 7th event in London, that people flew from everywhere to be there, you know. And that's what I say about connection is everything, because you put people together that share the same thing in common, and they pick you up when you're down, or you pick them up when they're down. It can mean such a difference. So that's what got me through the first 6 to 12 months. But I remember when I hit a year, I had a slump then, because it was almost like when you have a baby and then you're left with a baby in the middle of the night screaming, and you're not getting text messages and whatever, and you're kind of like, what do I do now? You know, so there was another little thing. It's never linear, this sober life, is it? So I went through 2 or 3 weeks of what does this mean now? And the second year, as you know, is very different from the first year. And the third year is very different from the second year. So it's amazing how it goes. But it is, again, like, don't look too far ahead, because it is a day at a time, and get through that day and tick that box. And before you know it, you're coming up to 3 years. I'm 4 years in a couple of weeks. And it's like, wow, where's that gone?
Absolutely. I mean, it just blows my mind that within 9 months you were running your own sober events. I'd love to know, what was the driving force behind that? You know, you're now an accredited grey area drinking coach as well. So what was fueling you to move into want to work in this space?
I think it was because I'm a bloke and I've got an accent. You know, I'm not from Cambridge University, shall we say. And I also say it how it is. I'm very honest about it. So I say when I'm having a bad time or when I'm having a good... It's not all fluffy clouds and rainbows, you know. I've always been very honest about it. And it wasn't long before I started getting messages of... I really love your page, Dave, and how honest you are. I'm really struggling at the moment. And I realised that actually by me replying, and I replied to every message as well, that I was being able to use my experience of my drinking and my sobriety to support other people. And I think from then I realised there was a lot of, not power, but like, ability to support others going through the same thing, you know. And I was training to be a counsellor when I was drinking as well, which was a complete car crash because I was doing a lot of the homework drunk. So I had that background as well. And then I did my course with Jolene Park, and I loved that. And then I just realised that there's so much space in the community to support other than AA, because if you go back 5-10 years, that's all people thought there was, and there's so much now. So I did my first event, and I did a little talk on the stage and whatever, and then other things come along, don't they? You get sort of noticed it on social media, and then you get asked to do talks and write blogs, and then I decided to do my podcast, which literally come out of nowhere one day. So I think I might do a podcast. And then I recorded it, and within a month it was out, and it went to number 3 in the Apple charts. It was like, what? Yeah. What's going on here? And then the book, I started writing the book, which was a whole new can. I mean, I don't know if you've started that yet, going down that avenue. Oh my God, talk about open a can of worms, but it's equally cathartic as well, because it took a couple of years and like digging up some stuff that you didn't even really know was there, is your own journey of recovery when you're in recovery. Do you know what I mean? And so all these little stepping stones, but I've reached a place now that I've come to a bit of a plateau, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure what I want to do, but that's okay as well, because I'm almost just like treading water in the Mediterranean Sea now, looking around me and thinking, it doesn't really matter what's next. The main thing is my health is really, really good. My mental health is so much better. And my relationships, friendships and that are spot on, because I align completely differently now with people. I don't have toxic people in my life. They were just beer buddies back in the day when I thought they were real mates, and they all got filtered out over time.
Oh, it's so true, isn't it? I think those superficial friendships just naturally fall away, and what you end up creating is this foundation of really solid people within your life, and you have that really pure connection that when you spend time with those people, for me personally, I leave with a full cup. Whereas those other friends, I would always leave empty and depleted.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the key difference there.
Yeah.
Tell me, what's been the hardest part about getting sober for you?
As I said initially, it's never linear, and so lockdown, I was a year sober, and you might expect me to say I really struggled in that time. I didn't. I was so grateful, because I wouldn't have known how to have got the amount of alcohol I was drinking into the house. It would have been a nightmare for me. So I really, really found lockdown fine, absolutely fine. I was so grateful. But in the last year, I've gone through a marriage breakup. Everything in my life has changed. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on decisions that I've made throughout my life, sitting with those thoughts, dealing with a range of emotions that I could only really deal with now sober, because if I was drinking, I'd have made some rash decisions and regretted them in the morning, And so I've found the last few months really difficult. I've moved 4 or 5 times in the last year as well, which has been challenging. But now I'm in a place that's serene, it's peaceful. I live in a beautiful cottage, and at the back there's, as I was saying to you previous to this, horses in a field and sheep, and the environment reflects how I want my life to move on, is a simple, gentle life, because I'd lived 40 years of chaos, and I look at it as chaos because everything was chaotic, and now I can go to bed at night rested, proud of myself that I've remained sober throughout this whole process, and I feel excited about what's ahead, even though I don't know what that is. I'm trusting the universe there, and I think, do you know what? I've allowed myself the opportunity to live a really good life now, and whatever that may look like in the future is I'm going to leave it up to the universe, and see what comes along. And that's why I feel in a really good place at the moment.
That's beautiful. I love what you said about allowing the universe to guide you. It's this sense of trusting in a higher power or a higher self, and knowing that, as you described how your life has changed and all of these things have started to fall away. But what I was really feeling there was this sense that you're coming back to you even more and connecting back to that authentic Dave, and whilst you have to travel through some really painful moments to get to that, it's like the path has already been written, as long as you let yourself be guided into that path rather than trying to control and strangle life and, create what you think you need to have. It's like, let go, be in flow, and exactly what's meant for you will evolve.
Absolutely. And you know what as well, I'm 58 now, and I think, do you know what? I've allowed myself to live the next however long to the best I can, rather than looking at the next 12 years of more chaos. I've freed that up. The amount of headspace you get when you take that drug out is incredible. The amount of acceptance that you've been given another chance, wherever that comes from, like just self-belief, trusting the universe, and believing that the path is laid out for you as well. And of course you've got to follow certain rules, like you can't just think, oh, well, that's it, I'm done now. Because that whole thing what I said to you before about it's impossible for me to say I will never drink again. But believe me, Ash, for what I've experienced in the last few months, if there was a time to drink, it would have been then. But every single day I've got up and I've thought about my life ahead, what that would mean. I've thought about the people in my life, what would that mean? And it's every single day, it's not been an option to drink. I've removed that option. It's a non-negotiable. And that's my rule of thumb, is just every day I will not drink alcohol today. It's a non-negotiable, because I think the minute you start to think, oh, do you know what? I could murder a glass of wine. Then that horrible demon start playing subliminally in the back of your mind, and before you say it, oh, I had a drink, I don't know why. Well, where did that start actually? Let's be real about it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's I feel free, and why would I ever want to go back to that chaos?
I feel the exact same way. Dave, there's one final question that I love to ask all of my guests that come here onto the show. Now, that question is, what are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live this life today that, as you just shared then, is full of freedom?
What a great question. I think it's being true to myself every single day, is wake up and just do the very best I can to have real, authentic, genuine relationships in my life, because when I look back, I've not done that, and I can really see the benefit of surrounding myself with people that are true to themselves as well as myself. And I think as well, it might sound cheesy, but to be positive, I think with everything that goes on these days, it's quite easy to go down that rabbit hole of complaining about everything. But I think if you can just try and rise above that and look at the brighter side of life, and that it affects your mood throughout the day, and can have a real impact to how you look at the future as well. And that's what I quite often talk to my clients, or whatever you want to call them, when they come to me, they're looking down at the floor because they feel in complete despair. And it's about taking the blinkers off and looking around, at the view and what is actually in front of you. But I think when you're in the despairs of drinking, you don't see it. And it's allowing yourself to see what is actually around you in your life.
And so if somebody's listening here today and they're in that pre-contemplation phase, they're considering giving up alcohol, but they're still feeling a bit of indecision around all of it, what's the one thing that you would say to them?
I think there's a reason why they would be listening to this podcast, why they would be following people on social media, that they should start to explore the idea of having one day without alcohol, a week or a month. Just use it as an experiment. Do some journaling, write your feelings down, connect with community. There's lots of online groups that you can join. Listen to podcasts. You can see all sorts of resources on YouTube as well. There are some amazing books out there, right, Ash? And
that's it. We'll pop yours in the show notes.
Yeah, there's so many things now that you can do to educate yourself, and like it is achievable, as we can prove that ourselves. It's having, even if it's a little bit of self-belief, thinking, do you know what, I'm going to try not to drink today and see how I go with it. It's a start. We've all got to start somewhere, haven't we? And just having a little bit of faith. And I know what worked for me was when he said to give up for 3 months, I started to visualise how my life could look in 3 months' time. How would I look physically? How would my mental health be? How would my relationship be? My peace of mind. And that was a real driver for me. It was like winding my life forward to see of the version that I could be, rather than the version that I would be if I carried on drinking. And that kind of worked for me. So I just think, you've got to start somewhere. And that might be by listening to this interview or hearing someone say one thing on Instagram or Facebook that could just set you off on a new path for your life.
Such sound advice. Dave, it's been such a joy having you on the podcast today. If people want to discover more about you, find your books, listen to your podcast, where should they go?
Well, people can find me on my Instagram at SoberDave. My book, One for the Road, is on Amazon all over the world, and my podcast is on your usual Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I'm now on season 8, and they're all life stories. So they're really useful for people to hear how people have gone from that life to a life without alcohol. And there's all sorts of people on there, musicians, actors, actresses, like everyday people that have struggled and they've come away from it. So it's a really useful resource, actually. Yeah. And I want to say to you, Ash, as well, I'm really, really grateful that you've invited me on your podcast, because it's brilliant, and you should be proud of yourself as well.
Thank you, Dave. I'll make sure I pop all of your information in the episode show notes. We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one need suffer in silence. So I cannot thank you enough for being here with me today, for sharing your story, and for all of the amazing work that you do.
Thank you so much, Ash. And one day I might get to meet you. Who knows, eh?
Absolutely. We will be making that happen for sure.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy. Thank you.
See you later, Dave.
Bye.
A big thank you for tuning in today. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by clicking the subscribe button and leaving a review. Every review helps this podcast become more discoverable, meaning more people can hear these stories of strength and hope. Together, we will continue to remove the stigma around mental health, trauma, and addiction. Remember to reach out to those you care about, and I'll see you next time.